Mr. Speaker, and fellow senators. I'm Mittens Ramjob Romney, and I'm here to tell you that this vote is the most important vote that we in this hallowed body shall ever take. If we do not continue sending billions of dollars to fund the whole-scale destruction of the nation formerly known as Ukraine, Vladimir Putin will come into your house, enter your bedchamber, and inseminate your wife. He will slowly penetrate your blushing bride and entertain himself with her nubile, budding breasts. If we do not continue to pour our dusty old military hardware into Ukraine, facilitating the death of every single young man in that country, Vladimir Putin will call you a pathetic Yankee cuck while he thrusts his rigid, authoritarian member repeatedly between your wife's milky white thighs. He will ask your wife, "How do you enjoy having such a powerful, dictatorial statesman inside of you?" She will breathlessly answer him,
"I like it very much, Vladdy Daddy."
If we do not continue to send old men, women, and people with Down syndrome to the Russian front, where they can be promptly torn apart by Russian artillery, or perhaps shot by neo-Nazis for attempting to desert, Vladimir Putin will make eye contact with you while he coldly informs you, "I'm making your wife fall in love with me." He will then ask Beatrice, that finicky, disloyal strumpet, to confirm this assertion. Beatrice will make sure you know he's correct. She will move to Moscow to be with him. You will curl up in a corner each night, sobbing and suckling your thumb. I'm Mittens Romney, and sending money and weapons to a country with no more young men left to die, where dentists are press-ganged into conscription on their way to performing a root canal, where being stopped at a checkpoint means being sent to the front lines to blow up, and where hardcore neo-Nazis are allowed to flourish, is simply the right, just, and indeed only thing to do. Now, if you will excuse me, I need to tie my dog to the top of my car and drive 4 hours up a mountain to do God knows what. Tell Beatrice, that beautiful, bashful young biscuit, that I, Mittens Ramjob Romney, do not need her anymore. My fellow Samaritans, this is Genocide Joe Biden, Emperor of the Anglo-American Death Cult, and I'm in a bad mood. Today's been a crappy day for me, Grandpappy Sniffs, and I don't abide bad days, Jack, 'cause I'm a world-controlling skull-faced legend. Firstly, things off was scrub-sucking assholes at the White House Medical Unit fucked up my cognitive enhancement and intellectual stabilizer shots, Mac. I think they ran out of juice. Yeah, they're spinning yarns about toxic overloads, but you know, my grandpappy would always say to me, "One day, Joey, you're gonna need about a liter of futuristic brain injection juice a day just to keep on going. Keep me executing my sacred mission of demoralizing the American public and carrying out the industrial scale, violent, bloody flailings of a dying empire. The land of Palestine's been a graveyard of empires for millennia, Jack. The Mongols, those nice fellows on a horse, and the Romans and the Persians and the Greeks and the Brits, they all perished in the sands of Palestine, trying to occupy that land. But my empire is different. No other empire in history has been led by such an eloquent, cogent, and brilliant statesman as me. I'm a goddamn legend, Jack. Me, old Genocide Joe. I gotta bust a Nero in the White House bedchamber, where I lay my blown out skull to whisper bizarre, disturbing mumblings in the night. But anyway, sorry, I got carried away there. What was I talking about? I tell you, it's
hard to find the unvaxxed adrenochrome these days. Half the time I go to worship Baal, I feel like I got a head full of Beatles. Not those nice English blokes that sang about holding people's hands. Like my spiritual guru, George H.W. Bush, and his son, that feisty fake cowboy fella. Used to hold hands with King Abdullah from Audi Samaria, spoiled Arabia. Come on, man, you know. I've been on the phone with BB, I really mean it, to ask for more vinyl copies of Shlomo artsy EPs and to inquire about the latest spy tech transfers to China, and I asked him, if he'd maybe, kindly consider if it's okay with him to, perhaps the full-scale slaughtering of women, kids, and babies, and to, perhaps convene a council to, discuss the legal justifications of, sending those death squads into hospitals, murdering patients in their beds, and, leaving elder civilians to die without oxygen. Because the president's words matter, Jack. That's why I appointed my Secretary of State to be a dedicated generational Zionist who continues to metronomically sign orders for daily airdrops of bombs and missiles to be sent to our beloved Zionist colony that can then be dropped on the women, kids, and babies that I really mean it, man. I'm asking BB to not make me look bad at our online checkers match. We got a Discord for it now, man. Joey B and BB's checkers chat. Man, it's a real quirky community, I tell you. I mean, and I tell them, man, I say, you gotta do what you gotta do. It's a settler colonial state, man. It's their unsinkable aircraft carrier in the Middle East. If Israel didn't exist, we'd have to invent an Israel. So if, you gotta put a tank shell through the UN logo on the refugee center, we'll take a picture of it and print it on a t-shirt, and I'll hand them out the next time I speak to a foaming at the mouth Christian Zionist megachurch. And God bless them, man. They just want to build that, the 33rd temple or some shit. Anyway, Jack, I got a meeting coming up with my re-election campaign chair and those nice fellas or those nice ladies at Femmes for Dems. Some real bulldogs there, I tell you. They'd support Pol Pot as long as he was facing off against my opponent. I think they're calling him Orange Mussolini. It's a race for the suburbs, man. It's the last demographic of Americans that actually believe in a transparently corrupt and openly rigged electoral process. So, the Femmes for Dems are gonna take me out to some goddamn suburb somewhere, and I'm gonna have to totter over a Weber grill and smile for the camera alongside the livestock. I mean, the people. Man, I hope there's something good to sniff on the menu if you know what I mean. Old Grandpa's got a hankering for some hair. Okay, I got it. Jill, get the reenhancement, The cognitive juicer shot. Good God, Grandpa's running on fumes. And get a hold of someone who could find me some guaranteed unvaxxed adrenal glands. I don't care who, Jill. Get one of our nice special forces guys in Sudan to handle it. And make sure the ice cream for Mario Karts is chocolate chip this time, wench. I didn't like that caramel slop by those drug-addled hippies Jen and Barry. Give me Haagen-Dazs any day. It's that German ice cream engineering, Mac. And give me back mandatory minimal sentencing. And bring back segregation too. Just like my old pal Tom Sturman used to wax poetic about. Alright, President Biden's signing off. I'm gonna catch a little shut-eye just until the neck injection comes. I can feel it right in my veins. That'll wake Grandpa up. I'll go smile by the grill for these goats. And slaughter the goats for Baal.
It's about time we stop, those of us who support, as most of us do, Israel in this body, for apologizing for our support for Israel. There's no apology to be made. None. It is the best $3 billion investment we make. Were there not an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interest in the region. The United States would have to go out and invent an Israel.
The second part is people should understand by now, that should be crystal clear, that Israel is the single greatest strength America has in the Middle East. I always say to my friends when they say those things to you, I say, imagine our circumstance in the world were there no Israel. How many battleships would there be? How many troops would be stationed? You know, I used to say early on when I was a kid, I'd say, when I was a young senator, I'd say, if I were a Jew, I'd be a Zionist. I am a Zionist. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist.
Progress occurs in the Middle East when everyone knows there's simply no space between the United States and Israel.
There is no space between the United States and Israel when it comes to Israel's security.
The Palestinian Health Ministry has calculated that since October 7th, Israel has killed more than 29,000 Palestinians and injured nearly 70,000, with thousands more missing or buried under the rubble. And the Israeli army's systematic attacks on hospitals continue. As of Monday, the Nasser medical complex in Khan Yunis, which has been under siege by Israeli forces for 2 weeks, is no longer functional following Israel's raid and siege. 70 hospital staff have been arrested, 136 patients have been reportedly trapped inside, 8 patients have died from lack of oxygen supply, and there is no electricity, food, or water, according to Medical Aid for Palestinians.
I am an active duty member of the United States Air Force, and I will no longer be complicit in genocide. I'm about to engage in an extreme act of protest, but compared to what people have been experiencing in Palestine at the hands of their colonizers, it's not extreme at all. This is what our ruling class has decided will be normal.
What you just heard were the last words of Aaron Bushnell, a 25-year-old active duty member of the U.S. Air Force who worked in information technology and development operations. A friend who spoke to Bushnell on the phone the Saturday night before his self-immolation Bushnell confided in his friend that he had top security clearance and that he was distressed by what he was seeing in Gaza. Quote, "He told me on Saturday that we have troops in those tunnels, that it's U.S. soldiers participating in the killings," the friend said. Quote, "There's just too many things I don't know, but I can tell you that the tone of his voice just had something in it that told me he was scared," the friend said. After Bushnell's sacrifice in front of the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C., the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine made a statement honoring him, saying that the act of a U.S. soldier sacrificing himself for Palestine is the highest sacrifice and a medal, and a poignant message to the U.S. administration to stop its involvement in the aggression. The Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine affirmed that the act of Aaron Bushnell from the U.S. Air Force, by setting himself on fire in front of the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C., in protest against the genocide in Gaza, in which he called for the, quote, liberation of Palestine, confirms the state of anger among the people in the U.S. due to the official U.S. involvement in the Israeli genocidal war being waged on the Gaza Strip. And I just want to say, rest in power, Aaron Bushnell. Your sacrifice will be immortalized in the hearts of the Palestinian people, as well as in the hearts and the souls of people of conscience across the globe. I hope that your spirit finds peace, brother, and I want to send condolences to his family, friends, and loved ones. Aaron Bushnell making the ultimate sacrifice affected me really deeply, and I shed tears, and I just have a deep and abiding respect for the man, and I will forever. And as someone myself who, it's hard to put into words, I will forever respect him for the sacrifice that he made. And it's immortalized in my heart and my soul as well. And it's just all the more fuel and purpose that I feel to continue speaking my truth, to not compromise in my ideals, and continue doing everything I can in my way to raise my voice right now. Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now. What's up, love doves? I am your loyal host, Little Raven. And I'm coming at you from a Wednesday evening in the barrio. I've been dealing with the ebbs and the flows of life. You know how it is. And all we can do is just continue moving forward, continue putting one foot in front of the other, and continue focusing on action. And that's what I'm doing. I'm focusing on action, and I'm putting out this little mini episode. I hope you enjoyed the zany audio tidbits at the beginning. I did have a good time recording those. And what really brought me to the mic initially is some words from my good friend and brother, Brandon, a Palestinian American who was featured on the episode I did a couple months ago, History of Palestinian Land, Family of Resistance. If you have not listened to that episode, I highly recommend that you do. And he's someone that I've come, interestingly enough, in my efforts to help be there and support him in this time of grief and pain for him as a Palestinian American. He's been there for me in so many ways, and when I see him, he lifts my spirits, and he also gives me really good, honest feedback and advice. And that's what friends do, is they give you honest feedback. And so I had my vent cast a few episodes ago where I kind of let loose on the mic, and I was going through my own struggles emotionally, mentally, spiritually, negotiating my habits, negotiating my relationship with my medicines, and so he appreciated that ventcast, and I appreciated him telling me so, because I did have some feelings of self-doubt about it, like maybe I went a little too hard in the paint, or but I think there's a lot of value in just being raw and authentic, and that anger that I feel at the ruling class, at having to witness having a genocide live streamed in front of my face, and feeling like politically homeless in this country, having no faith in our electoral process, continuously detoxing from the poisons in the air and the food, continually being spied upon, harassed, people prying into my beliefs, people prying into my personal life, my plans. It's hectic out on these streets, and having a true friend like Brandon means a lot. And so anyway, he gave me some feedback. He said, "Can I offer some advice?" And I said, "Please." And so he offered me some advice, and I got his permission to quote directly from him. This was text message, and I'm going to quote directly from him. And this was Brother Brandon, Palestinian American, good friend, his advice and feedback after my ventcast. He said, "I think collectively we are all grappling with the lack of humanitarian progress with Gaza. And we're all learning how even the most basic humanitarian steps for peace building, such as a ceasefire, are rejected and gaslit, right? And we are frustrated and fatigued and horrified. But it's important to understand the context of Zionist power. Zionism, as defined by Chomsky and others, is a military form of imperialism and settler colonialism. It's among the most insidious forms. There are more Zionists in America, i.e. Christian Zionists, than there are Israeli. By number, not proportion. But so Zionism is a deeply entrenched ideology. And AIPAC's capture of US politicians, along with the hegemony of the military-industrial complex in all facets of American society, and by extension global society, makes it a decades-long, multi-trillion-dollar structure. The reason we are at a point where Israel can commit genocide in broad daylight is because of that economic, political, and military buildup. So what is happening now, the world opening its eyes, burning down the false narratives, it's historic. Palestinians have been experiencing incremental genocide for decades. And honestly, Norman Finkelstein, the only chronicler of Gaza, was about to give up on Gaza because he was convinced the world had forgotten and moved on. What is happening now are massive geopolitical events. 50% of Americans are struggling to pay rent. Unprecedented levels of wealth-income inequality. Environmental existentialism. Poorest generation in American history. The police and surveillance state. It's all being challenged in formidable ways. And the US government is approaching the issue from an operational capabilities point of view. But it's not working out. So, it's hopefully a paradigm shift. But structurally, until we have economic equity, we won't have democracy or global peace building. It's a protracted struggle. And he ended with this. He said, "The people of Gaza are fighting, but they are also teaching us how to fight." And that is so fucking beautiful. So I'm gonna end this mini episode by reading from an article that was published on truthout.org. It's an interview with international relations scholar and expert Richard Falk. And I'm going to be revisiting this topic. I'm going to be talking about some history that I've been looking into, the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin, and what has been going on in the political landscape of Israel since that assassination. It reminds me a bit of the turning point in the United States when JFK was turkey shot in broad daylight, and it was a message to the American people that you're not actually in control. You can elect someone who's actually ready to make real changes. JFK wasn't perfect, I'm not romanticizing the man, but he was ready to do some real shit. He was going to get us out of Vietnam, he was going to break up the power of the intelligence agencies, and they domed him in the head in broad daylight in Dallas, Texas, and it was a message to the American people that you don't live in a democracy. And I wonder if that was a similar message to the Israeli people when Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated. Also another deeply flawed figure, but a figure who did seem to genuinely be working towards some sort of possible two-state situation that would provide an apparatus for the Palestinian people and the Israeli people to live, if not together, at least side by side, and respect one another's cultures, and in time maybe even learn to get along. But he was assassinated by most likely people in the Likud party connected to Benjamin Netanyahu, and the rest is history. And that, I wonder if that was a message as well to the Israeli people. You don't live in a democracy either. So the details about Rabin's death are very sketchy. I've been looking into them. Apparently he died, the shots appeared to have been blank, and then he died in a car. He was shot point blank in a car after leaving the scene. So again, I'm going to go into that deeper on a future episode, but I want to end this mini-ep by reading Richard Falk. He was asked the question, could you explain the impact of Israeli attacks on the city of Rafah, the southernmost city in Gaza? I'm not going to read the whole article, but I'm going to read some segments that I think are very eloquent and pertinent. Israel is seeking to destroy Rafah, the last major sheltering place of refuge for over half of Gaza's civilian population, in the space of no more than 25 square miles, accustomed to a population of about 110,000, or a tenth of its present dense occupancy, by desperate Palestinians. It is a kind of genocidal testing ground, with Israel pushing Egypt behind the scenes to accept large numbers of Palestinian refugees. It is also the endpoint of Palestinian internal evacuation, with a significant percentage of survivors facing death by starvation or disease, and being forced to consider the alternatives of dying by refusing to leave Gaza, or somehow find a way to cross the border to Egypt, where they would likely not be welcomed, and their presence treated as a provocation by Israel, possibly widening the orbit of conflict in the region. Rafah cannot be understood apart from the genocidal assault on Gaza that commenced days after the Hamas attack of October 7. These assaults, accompanied by Israeli forced evacuation orders, failed even to assure safety for those Palestinians that complied with orders to flee their places of residence or the sites they had previously believed safe. And in fact, this is my editorial here, but Israel was shooting and killing civilians who were fleeing. So they would tell civilians to flee, and then they would shoot and kill and injure them while they were fleeing. Continuing here with the article as spoken by Richard Falk. This demonic dynamic of forced evacuation and destruction of residential neighborhoods of Gaza, leaving 80% of homes in northern Gaza destroyed and damaged, is a clear signal that Israel's primary intent is not security or victory against an adversary in warfare, but is part of an undisclosed plan to establish, quote, Greater Israel, unquote, by asserting sovereign rights in the West Bank and now seemingly in at least parts of Gaza. A secondary goal for the Israeli government is the destruction of the capabilities and, more importantly, the will of the Palestinian people to resist in the future continuing denials of their rights under international law. Above all, the right to self-determination. A likely further goal is by responding to the Hamas attack so disproportionately and barbarously Now, we love barbarians here at the Barbarian Noetic Podcast, but I understand what Falk is saying. Israel seems to be sending a message to potential regional adversaries of the kind of response they might expect should Israel be attacked or provoked, what amounts to an extension of the Dahiyya doctrine articulated during the 1982 war in Lebanon. The mainstream media continue to limit criticism of Israel to humanitarian issues arising from its conduct of the quote war unquote, paying virtually no attention to the near unanimous ICJ rulings and to the dehumanization of Palestinians by the language and tactics relied upon by Israel. Without using the word genocide, they reconfirm in word and deed the genocidal character of the assaults on Gaza, including most recently Rafah, the most southern city in the Strip, normally with a population of about 100,000, but now swollen to more than 1 million living under crowded, makeshift, and life-threatening conditions. Two elements need to be strongly asserted. First, what is unfolding in Rafah in real time is the terminal phase of what I called the most transparent genocide of all time. That's a quote. This horrifying dehumanization of the Palestinian people has been unfolding for over 4 months. And secondly, the contention that Palestinian civilian losses in Gaza are, quote, collateral damage, unquote, in a, quote, war, unquote, of self-defense is a malicious evasion of any reasonable interpretation of the violence. Israel is legally present in Gaza and the West Bank as an occupying power subject to the Fourth Geneva Convention, the core commitment of which is the duty by the occupier to protect the civilian population under its administrative authority. Hence, it is inappropriate and diversionary to speak of war and self-defense. Part of what has protected Israel from the growing rage is the active complicity of leading liberal democracies by way of direct military assistance, combat intelligence, and diplomatic support. And if we believe, as I do, what Aaron Bushnell told his friend the Saturday before he made the ultimate sacrifice, not just combat intelligence, but combat troops are being directly assisted. This has rendered the UN helpless, and the media remains silent as to the criminality of Israel's behavior. This complicity includes backing Israel's nihilistic approach to international institutions, law, and procedures by outrageously viewing South Africa's recourse to mechanisms of peaceful settlement of disputes by way of the International Court of Justice as, quote, baseless and without legal merit. South Africa, as a party to the Genocide Convention, has every right and arguably a responsibility to invoke Article 9 of the Genocide Convention, as authoritatively reinforced by interim order of the ICJ, granting South Africa requests for provisional measures by a near unanimous set of rulings. Such an outcome brought honor and increased respect to the ICJ throughout the world. Nearly all the regular 15 judges cast votes that reflected their view of the law at issue rather than policy preferences of their national government of allegiance. He continues. I skipped a little bit ahead. The deep state operates in a non-accountable manner invisible to the public. Congress operates in these policy domains with the tacit approval of non-accountability to the extent that its worldview and policy goals contravene international law. To a limited extent, whistleblowers have exposed this black box mode of operations, which can impact the views of high elected officials and public opinion. Whistleblowing and conjecture by informed scholars addressing past, present, and future foreign policy initiatives can expose some dark and hidden undertakings of the deep state. American absolutist support for Israel is clarified by being seen through such an optic, as is the unwavering endorsement of record highs in military budget, despite a record over the past half-century of losing war after war. Such an understanding helps explain the response of the liberal, quote, democracies led by the US under a NATO umbrella to Israel's post-October 7 genocidal behavior in recent months to Gaza. This Israeli campaign is on course to consummate this unspeakable tragedy to the 2.4 million long-suffering Palestinians by its all-out assault on Rafah, the last sheltering place within Gaza. The basic logic of Defense Minister Netanyahu, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, Minister of National Security Itamar Ben-Gvir, and Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich all along have stressed forced displacement, destruction of homes, and attacks on hospitals, schools, and UN buildings. The unmistakable message to the Palestinians, written in blood, is leave or we will kill you, and at best, make Gaza unlivable. Even before the Hamas attack, Israel, as led by Netanyahu and extreme Zionists, has pursued thinly disguised goals under the guise of, quote, self-defense, associated with satisfying remaining territorial ambitions and solidifying ethnic supremacy. Yet the governments of the liberal West refuses to alter their complicity by challenging the genocidal victory scenario that has been operationalized with lethal consequences for Palestinian children and women that comprise over 70% of the nearly 30,000 deaths. Just to put the number, this is my editorial, but just to put that number 30,000 into perspective, because it's hard sometimes. We get so desensitized and you hear about 1 million people in Iraq dying and you hear a number like 30,000 and it's a lot. But just to really drill it home how much that is, 30,000. I thought about doing a kind of experimental cast where I just counted from 1 to 30,000, where I counted every second. 1 to 30,000, with each second and count representing a life, a Palestinian life, a story, dreams, goals, triumphs, pains. 30,000 of them. And I realized that if I did that, if I counted 1 second for one Palestinian death, it would take me 10 hours. And that really drilled it home for me. Also, that number is increased by at least another 7,000 missing and presumed dead below the rubble. This refusal to hold some states accountable for the most vicious of crimes can no longer be hidden from ordinary people throughout the world. Some governments in the global south are slowly building and encouraging a nonviolent solidarity campaign in support of the Palestinian struggle. With the spillover to neighboring countries tied in various ways to Iran, Israel and its supporters would seemingly benefit from an encounter with Iran, both as a distraction from the Rafah finale to the Gaza operation and to strengthen prospects to establish regional hegemony in the Middle East, built around the relations between the US, Israel, and Saudi Arabia. The anomaly of Saudi Arabia aligning with the West is an expression of opportunistic preoccupation of its absolutist dynastic regime and does not refute the inter-civilizational nature of what is at stake in Gaza, which serves as a metaphor for the growing cleavage between the global West and the rest of the world. There is little doubt that for a long time to come, Israel will be treated as a pariah state by many governments and by important segments of public opinion, even and especially in the United States and most of Europe. If the Rafah phase culminates in starvation and disease, combined with pressures to seek sanctuaries in bordering Egypt, the negativity associated with Israel is likely to become a global reality in which anti-Israeli attitudes merge with real anti-Semitism, as distinct from the Zionist instrumental use of anti-Semitism to discredit critics of Israel. And that's a topic I'm going to be returning to in future segments. Anti-Zionist does not equate to anti-Semitic. I'll end here. Palestine has suffered all these years because there was an insufficient will and capabilities to organize an effective pushback against the Israeli dispossession of Palestinians in their own homeland. What has been happening in Gaza for more than 4 months, unfolding before the eyes and ears of the world, seems to be arousing as never before civil society to act on behalf of Palestinian rights, including the right of self-determination. Is this a temporary reaction to the humanitarian horrors yet unfolding in Gaza and also in the West Bank? Or is a global solidarity commitment to the Palestinian struggle the greatest moral cause of the peoples of the world? When this question has been answered, we will know whether the forces for law and justice are once more in their ascendancy, or whether the geopolitical oligarchs remain the guardians of the future. And I also want to pay my respect to Aaron Bushnell, was actually the second American to self-immolate in protest of the genocide of Gaza in the past 3 months. Unfortunately, the woman who made that same ultimate sacrifice 3 months ago in front of the Israeli embassy in Atlanta, Georgia, is not known. Her identity has been kept from us. And there have been quotes as I try to discover her identity. I just see slander and accusing her of hatefulness and anti-Semitism because she was wrapped in a Palestinian flag screaming "Free Palestine" as she set herself on fire and made that ultimate sacrifice. So I honor you too. I do not know your name. I hope I can learn your name at one point, but I honor you too. And this is a wake-up call to all of us, to all Americans, to all people of conscience. This is a wake-up call. And as I said, seeing Aaron Bushnell and reading a little bit about him, and 25 years old, he had the whole world in front of him. He had such rich horizons. You know, he was going to come out of the Air Force with information technology, top security clearance. He would have been, everyone would have wanted to hire him. He could have had any job he would have wanted. He was a committed, he committed himself to mutual aid, to helping the homeless, to helping people in his community. He just seems like an amazing person, and I'm sorry that the world will not get to know him better, but the United States people, we can't ignore this. And that's why he did it. He live streamed it. He continued to remain coherent even as he was burning alive, screaming "Free Palestine, Free Palestine, Free Palestine, Free Palestine." So with that, everyone, I'm gonna bring this mini episode to a close. I love and appreciate all y'all. Support links are in the description. And stay tuned, there's a lot coming. I've got a lot of interviews lined up, and I'm just pushing through myself because sometimes the despair can become crushing. But when I saw that video of that young man making that ultimate sacrifice, and I thought about the pain, the physical pain that he was in as he was yelling his final words, that was a wake-up call to me. That I have so much to be thankful for, and even though I feel hurt and sad and depressed sometimes and cynical sometimes, and I feel that hopelessness and that dread and that inner critic, that I also have a responsibility, and I will continue to execute my role to the best of my abilities. So thank you for being a part of it. I love and appreciate all y'all. Little Raven signing out until next time. Be good to one another out there. Hug the people in your life that you love. Tell them you love them. And let's activate and elevate the human spirit and make this world a better place. Let's hold this ruling class to account. All right, bless you all. Peace.
That great man, V.I. Lenin, at the turn of the century, wrote a book entitled Imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. Is it? Imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism? Yes. If one would read this little pamphlet, one would see here that Mr. Lenin had precisely pointed out that all of the world had already been conquered and divided by colonial powers. There was no else in the world left to be conquered or divided by colonial powers. This is the time when Zionism comes to rise. Zionism comes to look for a state when everywhere else in the world is already dominated. Thus, in order for Mr. Herzl to get a country for Zionists, what he did was to attach himself to imperialism, British imperialism in this case, quite specifically. Of course, as an African who suffered under the heels of British imperialism, I can have no love for it, and certainly I cannot love anyone who attaches themselves to it and attaches themselves to it for the foundation of a state and then call this a liberation movement. Liberation movements fight against imperialism, not with it. Clearly here. Yes. The legal foundation of the State of Israel is what is known as the Balfour Declaration. This declaration was issued in 1917. A man in the government of Britain named Balfour wrote a paper and promised the Jews a national home. The national home he promised them was an area which Britain was colonizing, Palestine. Palestine didn't belong to the British, just like Ireland doesn't belong to the British, even though they have troops there. But here, these British imperialists signed a note and gave it to the Jews, and they accepted it. Where is the morality for this? If you say that Israel belongs to you, then you don't go to a thief to get Israel, you go and take it. Once you go to an immoral being such as British imperialism, and this is the basis for you getting the land, then clearly here those who are truly liberation fighters must question this. The basis, we say, is the Balfour Declaration, and Zionists know it. The Zionism is certainly not a liberation movement because it never fought against any imperialism. As a matter of fact, today, Zionism is the baby, child, and infant protector of imperialism in the Middle East. It carries out the interests of American imperialism. As a matter of fact, Zionism and American imperialism is like this. If our tax dollars would stop giving money to Israel, the state would sink tomorrow. And certainly no one can deny that American imperialism is the leading imperialist nation in the world. So we cannot see how a liberation movement is so tied, string and ham to American imperialism. They work hand in hand with American imperialism. Thus they can hardly be a liberation movement. In addition to this, Zionism has nothing to do with anything religion, nothing. All religions are concerned with human beings after they die. That's what religions are for. Islam will tell you what happens to you when you die. As a matter of fact, this which forces you to live a good life so that after death you'll be able to enjoy the rewards of heaven. The same is true for Judaism. But Zionism says nothing about the individual after they're dead. They don't give a damn about you. The Zionism has nothing to do with religion at all. And one should not make the confusion here. The Palestinian state belongs to the Palestinian people. This is a fact.
على عهدي على ديني على أرض تلاقيني أنا نهلي أنا فديهم أنا دمي فلسطيني 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 أنا دمي فلسطيني أنا دمي فلسطيني